Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some of the biggest news we saw in college football yesterday was not a player entering the transfer portal. It wasn't a player committing to a different school. It was Dabo Swinney showing some signs that he might be getting active in the transfer portal this cycle. And we've talked about Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers, using the transfer portal a couple times throughout the season. Really excited to get into this one. And if they do decide to go to the transfer portal, want to talk about a few targets that Clemson could be going after this cycle. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. As the transfer portal season opens up, it's going to be extremely busy. And for Clemson fans, if Dabo Swinney does, in fact, decide to get into the transfer portal, we will be breaking down the roster moves. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys like you guys have. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to have the short discussion about Clemson using the transfer portal. And let's be honest, like the recipe of winning at the college football level is still developing the guys out of the high school ranks. And Dabo Swinney, there hasn't been a program that's done it at a higher level than the Clemson Tigers the last decade, right? We've seen them in all the success that they've had. That being said, and you look at the other blueprint schools, right? Georgia, you look at Alabama. These guys aren't going into the transfer portal and grabbing 15, 20 players and injecting them into the roster because they recruit at a high level from the high school ranks. But what do those schools do is they look at the roster and say, hey, where is a part of our roster that maybe is not where it should be heading into next season? We'll go out and grab a player or two from the transfer portal to supplement our roster. And I think you look at this Clemson team, there were plenty of spots on this Clemson roster heading into the 2023 season where they could have added some talent and depth to their roster at particular positions to make them a more competitive team in 2023. Again, we're not calling for Dabo Swinney to go out and grab 25 transfer portal guys, but maybe 3 or 4 or 5 guys that you're looking at this roster and saying, where could our roster benefit from some more talent and some more depth? And I look at Keon Coleman at Florida State at being kind of a perfect example. Like, what if Dabo Swinney said, yeah, we're a little thin at wide receiver. We're young. We're inexperienced. We kind of lack that dynamic playmaker. And what if you went out and added Keon Coleman? Just one transfer. I wouldn't be surprised if that led to maybe a win or two on their schedule. And that's how impactful one of these guys can be through the transfer portal. You're seeing the impact Keon Coleman is having for Florida State. What if he was on Clemson? A team that was really, really struggling to find anything downfield in that passing attack. I think it would have been a really exciting get, and I think it probably, quite frankly, would have made this Clemson team a lot better in 2023 than they were. So you look at this Clemson team, and where could they potentially add guys to make this roster maximized in 2024? I want to stay with this wide receiver position, and there's a lot of young talent on this Clemson team, right? You look at guys like Tyler Brown, Adam Randall, and Tony Williams, who was banged up. You have Brian Wesco and TJ Moore coming in that 2024 class. From a young talent standpoint, this is about as good as you felt from a Clemson wide receiver room in a very long time. That being said, what's the best way to supplement young and maybe inexperienced talent? Is going out and getting guys who have proven to be really good college football players at the college football level. There's a couple guys that I think would really benefit from Clemson bringing in this wide receiver room. The first guy I want to talk about, Eric McAllister from Boise State, part of that 2021 class, kind of guy that just went under the radar from the state of Texas. You take a look at his numbers from the 2023 season. I think he fits exactly what Clemson needs in that wide receiver room. Again, looking at Clemson's numbers on offense last year, only 4.9 yards per play. That was 99th in the country. 5.9 yards per pass. That was 122nd. This Clemson team really struggled to push the ball down the field and hit those explosive plays in the passing attack. You look at Eric McAllister, 47 catches for 873 yards. He averaged almost 19 yards per reception. This is a guy that can work downfield. He has a big frame, 6'4", 200 pounds, track background coming out of high school. He's big, he's fast, and he's shown that he can kind of work that ball down the field, hit those explosive plays, something that Clemson has really struggled with in the 2023 season. So you look at Eric McAllister potentially putting him on the boundary and hitting some more explosive plays, I think that would make a lot of sense in a very similar light. And again, we're not saying we got to go add 4 or 5 wide receivers, but we want some guys who can maybe hit some big plays. Going to go out to the Big Ten and talk about a guy in Donovan McCully from Indianapolis. He goes to Indiana as a quarterback recruit, ends up changing his position to wide receiver, and he was phenomenal in really his first year of being a full-time wide receiver for the Indiana Hoosiers. 48 catches, 644 yards, 6 touchdowns. This is a guy with a very big physical presence on the outside. And you look at what Clemson has, right? Guys like Tyler Brown, Antonio Williams, a guy like Brian Wesco, who I think is going to come in immediately and be a contributor. You have some really good movement skills. You have some really good smaller speed guys. Do you have that big boundary physical presence? Maybe not so much. A guy like Eric McAllister, a guy like Donovan McCully, who have that frame and that physicality at the catch point, would really supplement and round out a Clemson wide receiver room that, again, I think has a ton of young talent, but you're looking for some guys to come in with some of that experienced and proven talent at the college football level. Cade Klubnik going into year 3, this is the money year. And you want to surround him with as much talent and playmaking ability as you possibly can. Donovan McCully, Eric McAllister, I think would make a ton of sense for the Clemson Tigers. Now, I want to go to the offensive line too, which I've seen a lot of buzz, and this is probably one of the most widely debated conversations with Clemson fans was what was the evaluation of that offensive line. And quite frankly, I thought it got better as the season went on, but you're still the offensive line. You can never have enough quality offensive line bodies to add competition, to add depth. And they go out and offer a guy in Alan Haron. This is their first offer in the transfer portal this cycle from Shorter College. This is a guy that checks all the boxes, right? Maybe was under-recruited out of the high school ranks, 6'6", 320 pounds, moves really well. I'll say this right now. I mean, if Clemson's going out and offering a guy from the Division II ranks, there's no doubt there's a lot of aspects that you like about his game. And Alan Haron being one of those guys that has probably one of the higher upsides, because you look at the physical traits, 6'6", 320 with the movement skills he has. Like that's really exciting in terms of if you hit on him, you get him in, you get him developed, you're potentially looking at an all-ACC caliber offensive lineman. This is an offensive line that, again, some young talent, moving bodies around, 116 pressures given up last year. Like, that could be better. Like, I don't think a lot of Clemson fans would sit here and say this offensive line is in a great spot heading into 2024. It might not be in a horrible spot, but you are always looking to get better on the offensive line. Another guy I would be looking at, and again, kind of sticking to the kind of players Dabo wants to add in the transfer portal. You have a guy like Alan Haron who's just trying to make that jump to the Power 5 level. And then you have a guy like Jaylen Travis. These aren't guys with character concerns coming out of the transfer portal, which is, I think, the main reason why Dabo didn't want to use the transfer portal in the first place. And 4 years ago, that was probably the case. A lot of those guys in the transfer portal didn't hit it off with their coaches or teammates at their prior schools. You look at the transfer portal now, there's a lot of guys who are just looking to find better spots or making that jump up. And it's not all guys that have those character concerns. Another guy, Jaylen Travis from Princeton, 6'9", 315 pounds. He exhausted his eligibility at the Ivy League schools, and he's looking to transfer for that last year of eligibility. This is a wild stat. On 209 pass protection attempts in 2023, Jaylen Travis gave up 3 pressures. You talk about elite pass protection ability at the offensive tackle spot. Jaylen Travis has that. And again, there is a big step going up from the Ivy Leagues to the ACC Power 5 competition. But you look at the frame, you look at the skill set Jaylen Travis has, you think he could probably fit in pretty well and at least add some more competition and depth to that offensive tackle room. You look at the offensive tackle position. Everyone wants quality offensive tackles to be added into this roster. Jaylen Travis would represent a very quality offensive tackle being added to this Clemson roster. And the last position I want to talk about here, and this is historically such a strong unit for Clemson, and there's no doubt in my mind it will be strong in 2024 as well, but they're losing a lot of guys, right? You're talking about Rook, Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas, Justin Maskell, a lot of guys who played significant snaps for Clemson. It's on that defensive line. Two guys I'd be taking a look at. One, Antwan Peebles, graduate transfer from Duke. Clemson fans familiar with his game. Little bit of an undersized interior defensive lineman, but man, what he lacks in size, he makes up for with quick twitch and hand usage on the inside. This is a guy that registered 29 pressures last year, 4.5 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss. You know he can play high-level ACC ball. He's looking to find a new home. You're maybe looking to add some depth to that defensive line. Antwan Peebles would make a lot of sense for Clemson. Again, you have some studs on the defensive line, right? Guys like Peter Woods, TJ Parker. These guys are going to be all ACC caliber guys over the next couple of years. You might want to supplement that youth with some experienced guys that you know they can come in and play some ball at some high level. And these people's probably one of those best options. The last guy I want to talk about, going back to the Ivy League, Joey Slackman, currently the number 3 player in the transfer portal, the number 1 defensive lineman, has picked up offers from teams that the likes of Michigan. This would be another really good fit. And again, Ivy League guy, 6'4", 300 pounds, in 28 games, registered 25 tackles for a loss. This is a guy that's a former wrestler, knows how to use the hands, very, very good athlete. You look up a picture of Joey Slackman, he carries that 300 pounds at some next level stuff. I mean, this guy is absolutely rocked up, extremely strong at the point of attack. And again, you're looking to add potentially some depth to that Clemson defensive line. Guys like Antwan Peebles, Joey Slackman would make a lot of sense. And heading back to the overall conversation of Clemson in the transfer portal, there's no fans asking Dabo Swinney to add 20 bodies. And you don't, as a Clemson program that recruits to the level Dabo Swinney does, you don't need to add 20 guys. The teams that need to add 20 players in the transfer portal are guys that don't recruit to high school ranks nearly as good as Clemson. But there are spots on this roster that could benefit from some veteran talent and experience on this roster. Spots like the defensive line, the offensive line, the wide receiver room are those kind of spots. So maybe just 3 or 4 guys, one at each position, just add some depth and talent to those units. I really do think would go a long way. Now, this is not even half of the names that will eventually be in the transfer portal. So there is going to be a lot more options, a lot more targets for Clemson to be going after. Wanted to highlight a few of my favorites at the positions I think would make a lot of sense. Again, Clemson fans, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.